This is Algebra 2, Lesson 5.1, Graphing Quadratic Functions, begins on page 249. First thing is the definition of a quadratic function. It's a function in the form y equals ax squared plus bx plus c, where a can't equal 0. This is the first time we've dealt with x to the second power. Anytime you see x to the second power, its degree is 2. That means it's going to have a round or a parabola shape, which we'll look at on the next definition. A parabola a parabola is a U-shaped graph of a quadratic function called a parabola. So anytime what you wind up doing when you graph this is we're going to wind up graphing, if this was the vertex here, we're going to wind up graphing this side, and then we're going to make it match on this side, and we're going to create our parabola that way. But a parabola is U-shaped. It opens this way, meaning opening up like a U, if it is positive. So if you have a positive ax squared plus bx plus c, if a's value is positive, it's going to open that way. If it said negative ax squared plus bx plus c, it's going to open up the other way. It'll open up this direction. It'll look like a great big N instead of a U, or an upside down U. The vertex of a parabola, notice it's the lowest or highest point. If the graph opens this way, it's the very lowest point you can get. If the graph opens this way, it's the very highest point you can get. So we're talking about just, if you're using both of these graphs right here, and it's time and height, this first one might be the graph of a bungee jumper, because that person's going to go down all the way, get to that very lowest point, and then go back up. This next one over here might be the graph of throwing a ball up in the air. It'll go up as high as it can. It'll get to that very highest point, and then it'll come down. The axis of symmetry of a parabola is the vertical line passing through the vertex. Okay, so what we're going to do first, in a few minutes, we'll talk about each of the steps of this. But the axis of symmetry, when you graph this, if you have a parabola going this way, the axis of symmetry is where that vertex is. All it is a vertical line that goes through that vertex and goes all the way. It creates symmetry on both sides, or a mirror image on both sides. So once you find the vertex, let's say, for example, we found out that this vertex's point is 3, 1, for example. Its axis of symmetry would just be the x value. Its axis of symmetry would be x equals 3. That's just that line going vertically up and down. Standard form is what I've been saying for the last couple minutes. Ax squared plus bx plus c. That is called standard form. Okay. Ax squared plus bx plus c. Standard form of a linear equation, if you remember, was ax plus by equals c. That was a linear equation. Notice that's all x to the first power and y to the first power. Now we're dealing with x squared. Now we're dealing with a quadratic equation. Okay. This is how you graph a quadratic function. It says the graph of y equals ax squared plus bx plus c is a parabola with these characteristics. The parabola opens up if a is greater than 0. That means a is positive. It opens down if a is less than 0. That means a is negative. The parabola is wider than the graph of y equals x squared if the absolute value of a is less than 1, and narrower than the graph y equals x squared if the absolute value is greater than 1. That'll make a little bit more sense as we go through it. Okay, this is important. I'm going to write this one up on the board for you. The coordinate, or the x-coordinate of the vertex, is negative b, if you don't see that negative, over 2 times a. Negative b over 2a. This is how you find the x value. Once you find the x value, you simply plug the x value in, just like the bell work, to find the y value, and that gives you the vertex. The axis of symmetry, notice it's the exact same thing. Because if all the axis of symmetry is the x value, it's a vertical line at x, negative b over 2a. So example number 1 is graphing a quadratic function. The first thing you want to do is make sure you have it in standard form. Does this say ax squared plus bx plus c? Sure it does. There's a negative 1 right there that's representing a. It doesn't have the 1 shown, but you have to know that that's negative 1. So that's the first coefficient. The b coefficient is 2. And the C number, it's not a coefficient, is simply negative 2. Since a's value is negative, that's why it says since a is less than 0, you know that this parabola is going to open going down. Okay. Find and plot the vertex. That's the first thing you want to do. So what you want to do is you want to take this equation, negative x squared plus 2x minus c, and you want to use this here. The vertex, you find the x by saying x is negative b over 2a. Well, you have to identify what is b first. B's value is positive 2. So what is the negative of positive 2? Negative 2 over 2 times a's value. What is a's value? Its a's value is right here, negative 1. So what you wind up with is negative 2 over 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. Negative 2 divided by negative 2. X's value is 1. So right there you have your axis of symmetry at x equals 1, for example. If that was 1, you have an axis of symmetry that's going to go through just like that. Okay. But that doesn't tell you how high up or how far down it is. That doesn't tell you the y value. In order to find the y value, just do like you've always done to check problems. We got x's value at 1, so simply plug in 1 for each of these, and this is just like the bell work. Y equals 1 squared is going to be 1, and it's going to be a negative value since it says negative x squared. So the first one, y equals 1, plus 2 times 1 is plus 2, minus 2. All we did was plugged it into each of those x values. 1 plus 2 is 3. 3 minus 2. Y's value is 1. So now we have an ordered pair. We have x comma y, 1 comma 1. That is going to be our vertex at 1, 1. So at 1, 1 is as high as that thing's going to go. So right here, that's this next line was finding the y value. Okay, I made a mistake, everybody. Just correct the mistake I made right at the very beginning. It wasn't, it's 1 squared, and then you bring the negative down. Yeah, that makes better sense. So it's negative. Here's your y value right here, negative 1, not positive 1. X comma y, negative 1 is your y value, positive 1 is your x value. So you have your ordered pair, 1, negative 1. So that's the first thing you graph is 1, and don't let this confuse you right here. The first thing you graph is 1, negative 1. There's your first point. Once you have the vertex, you can draw your line of symmetry. Your line of symmetry, again, is that vertical line that separates it and makes it symmetrical on both sides at 1, 1. Then what you want to do is you want to slide over one x value. So if our x value right here was 1, go over one value. You could either go to x's value is 2 or x's value is 0. Which one would be easier to multiply, 2 or 0? 0 is much easier to multiply. What happens when you multiply something by 0? You get what? 0. Think about smaller numbers, not larger numbers. So go back to the equation and plug in the number 0. Y equals 0. And I'm going to clear a bunch of this off to make a little room right here. So when you plug in y's value as 0, you do just like the bell work. 0 squared is 0. Negative 0 doesn't mean anything. 2 times 0 is 0. So what you're left with when you plug in 0, you're left with y's value is -2. So where x is 0, that's right here, x is 0, y's value is going to be -2. Okay. Again, the line of symmetry makes it mirror it on the other side. So if you went over 1 to the left and you went down 1, then you go over 1 to the right and you go down 1. Now we have 3 points. You only need 5 points to make a parabola. Okay. So we want to slide over one more time. We can either slide to -1, or we could slide, you don't want to go to 2. We already have that one. You can go to the number 3. I personally think it's easier to multiply by -1. You're dealing with smaller numbers. Just make sure you keep your negatives in check. So when you plug in -1 here, now -1 squared is going to be 1, and then you multiply it by the negative up front, so you have -1. 2 times -1 is -2, and then -2. So this is when x's value is -1. -2 minus 2 is -3. -3 minus 2, y's value is -5. So when x is -1, that's this one here, y's value is -5. Again, slide over one more time and make the mirror image happen on that side, and you can draw your graph to represent your parabola this way and this way. Again, with practice, this gets way easier than it looks right now. Don't let this be intimidating to you. Okay, vertex and intercept forms of quadratic equations. This one right here is the vertex form. A times x minus h squared plus k. The vertex is hk. Now, the easiest way to look at this, it's the opposite of whatever you see as h. It's the opposite. And it's whatever it says, it's exact, it's the same as whatever it says as k. So if you have y equals x minus 2 squared plus 3, the vertex of this equation is very easy to see. The vertex is the opposite of -2. So what's the x value? 2. And it's exactly what it says right here for y. What's the y value? So the vertex of that equation right there would be 2, 3. So a big part of the equation is already simplified for you. 2, 3 is finding the vertex. The intercept form is a times x minus p times x minus q. The x-intercepts are p and q. The axis of symmetry is halfway between those two. Okay, so what it's saying is when you're looking at a graph of a vertex, or when you're looking at a graph of a parabola that looks like this, this is one of your x-intercepts. That's where it crosses through. This is your other x-intercept. That's where it crosses through. They are p and q, respectively. The axis of symmetry is halfway between those two. The axis of symmetry would fall halfway between them. And then for both forms, the graph opens up if a is greater than 0 or positive, and down if a is less than 0 or negative. Example number 2 is graphing a quadratic function in vertex form. It says the function is in vertex form where a is 2, h is 3, and k is -2. Because a is greater than 0, a is positive, it's going to open up. The parabola opens up. To graph the function, first plot the vertex. Remember, the vertex is the opposite of what you see here. So it says -3, so +3, and exactly what you see here, -2. So x comma y, 3, -2. And notice that's what we have written right down here as our vertex. Okay. The axis of symmetry is the vertical line that separates it in half and makes it mirror itself on both sides. Okay. And then you plot 2 points on each side. Again, it's easier to me to slide over one spot and multiply by the number 2 than it is to go over and multiply by the number 4. So you just plug it in back to the original equation. When you do x's value is 2, you just plug it in. 2 minus 3 is negative 1. So you have 2 times negative 1 squared minus 2. Negative 1 squared is going to be 1. 2 times 1 is 2. And 2 minus 2 is 0. So your y value is going to be 0 when your x value is 2. And we can see that point right there, 2, 0. That's sliding over one spot to the left. If you slide over one spot to the right, you make it mirror it. So now you have 3 of your points. The next x value is even easier to multiply. When you go over one more, you go to x's value is 1. Do the same thing. Plug in 1 where your x value equals 1. Plug in 1 right here. It says 1 minus 3 is negative 2. Negative 2 squared is going to be positive 4. So you have 2 times 4 minus 2. 2 times 4 is 8. And 8 minus 2 is 6. So your y value is 6 when your x value is 1. So at 1, 6 is your next point. Again, that was one spot, going over one more to the left. Go over one more to the right and make it mirror. You have 5 points. You can draw your parabola through all of those points. Okay, this first problem on the checkpoint says to graph y equals 1/2 x minus x minus 1. This is in standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c. The first step is to find the vertex. The vertex is equal to negative b over 2a. So what is our value for b? It's not x. What's multiplying by x? Negative what? Negative 1. So what we have is a negative, that's from this one, and then b's value is negative 1. Over 2, what is our a value? 1 what? 1/2. That's easy. What's half of 2 right there? When you multiply these two together. Just saying, what's half of 2? We know half of 2 is 1. So you have a negative times a negative is going to be a positive 1, and half of 2 is going to be 1. So your your x value of your vertex is 1 over 1. Your x value is 1. So right away you can put your line of symmetry at 1. Because that's going to be the x value is going to be 1. Now we have to determine how high or how low the y value is going to be. In order to do that, you want to plug 1 into all of these x values. So 1 squared is easy. It's 1. 1/2 times 1 is going to be 1/2. Negative, again, 1. So 1/2 minus 1 minus 1. 1/2 minus 1 is negative 1/2. I'm sorry, is negative 1/2. And negative 1/2 minus 1, your y value is negative 1.5. So you had your x value at 1. Your y value is negative 1.5. So that is your vertex. Is this parabola going to open up or going to open down? Well, what is our a value? Our a value, is it positive or negative? Positive means it opens up. So we're going to draw something that looks like that in a second. Okay. In order to determine which direction we draw it, slide over one value of x. Just slide over one value. Okay, so the easiest, it's easy to do 2, but I think it's even easier to do x's value is 0. So when you go back through your equation right here, y equals 1/2 x squared minus x. 0 squared is going to be 0. 1/2 times 0 is 0. Minus 0 is still 0. So when x's value is 0, y's value is what? Canceling all this out, what are we left with? Negative 1. So where x's value is 0, y's value is negative 1. So we just went up 1/2 a unit when we went over. We can make it mirror that right on the other side. That's what the axis of symmetry does. So now we can either multiply, we can plug x's value in as 2, or we can plug x's value in as negative 1. There's no wrong way to do it. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this stuff just to make this make a little bit better sense. Okay, when you plug in, I'll say negative 1. Negative 1 squared is going to be positive 1. Positive 1 times 1/2 is going to be 1/2. Negative 1 times this negative out front is going to be positive 1. Minus 1. When you plug in, x's value is negative 1. Y's value is positive 1/2 because these two cancel out. So right there, when x's value is negative 1, that's this value here. Y's value is 1/2, so halfway between 0 and 1. Make it mirror it on this side, and you have a parabola you can draw now.